Good evening, everyone. It's Tuesday, July 18th, 2023, and 7:30 p.m., and I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Finance to order. As always, first item on the agenda is public comment. I don't think we have any guests in the in the room tonight. And I did not receive, and Jen, did you receive any emails for public comment? Okay. So we'll move on to our first area of items today. It's under transfers. We have item 1, which is discuss and take action on the request to transfer $17,595 within the risk management department.
So when we set the budget, we have to make an assumption on what our property insurance and workers' comp renewal rates are going to be. We're usually under and over a little bit here and there, so this transfer is just cleaning up fiscal 23. We were under budget on workers' compensation, so we're looking to transfer $17,595 from there to other risk management lines. The main causes of our overage are LAP renewal. We assumed a 3% increase. It came in at 5.4. Big one was cyber. We budgeted a 23.38% increase based on historical, and it was actually 58.67. And excess liability budgeted based on historical. We assumed 21.5 and it came in at 24.7. Looking ahead to 24, I think we'll be pretty good. We assumed 5% for LAP, 50% for cyber, and 25% for excess liability. We do have the renewal in for cyber. It is around 50%, but we're going to be implementing multi-factor authentication on email. So once we have that in, we'll go back and see if we can have them reprice our cyber. But for now, to clean up 23, we need to move a total of $17,595.
Just a point of clarification, since we're past fiscal 23, is this like post-closing adjustments?
No, because we haven't closed the books yet. We haven't turned over to the auditors, and these are budgetary, and they usually will run us out until August or September on budgetary items.
Jen, just one question. I think we talked with the auditors on the cyber side. I think two-factor is great. I think we were also talking about possibly having, some type of sort of continuing ed, those online modules that we all have to go through
and
nowadays.
We have $5,000 in the 24 budget for some cybersecurity training, and I think that's already encumbered and getting scheduled by IT.
That's great. Okay. Any other questions?
Jen, what are we putting in for MFA? Do we know?
I don't know.
I'm going through it right now. That's why I asked. Literally.
You want to know if you're getting a good deal.
That's what I'm trying to do.
I don't know if the town's getting a good deal.
Send me a note, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Is this at all related to, the terrible stories you hear about towns and governments being, blackmailed for money?
That's part of it, but cyber in general for all sectors is just skyrocketing, and I mean to the point where every sector is getting held hostage and ransomed, and the insurance for that is
is it this policy that protects us against that?
Mm-hmm.
It's not actually a lot of money, huh? I mean, where does it fall on the right side of that ledger?
It is in general property and crime. So it was over by about $6,500, and within that line we had a better than budget renewal on our flood insurance, so it offsets some of that. But cyber is just getting more and more expensive.
And is that a monthly, annually, semi-annually? Okay.
And the letter says this is town-wide. Is this town including Board of Ed?
On the LAP policy it is. All the other, actually, yeah, the LAP policy is, I'm not sure about the cyber. I'm not sure on that one.
Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, I'll entertain a motion to make the transfer. Dave moves, Rob seconds. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, on discussion items. First one is discuss and take action on the request to authorize the hiring of a sanitarian using grant funds.
Yes.
Mr. Knopf?
Cable, podium.
Jen, do you know which speaker is active?
Probably the podium.
name's Dave Roth. I'm the health director here. I've been health director for 15 years, and I believe this is the first time before the Board of Finance. That's the first time I think I've never asked for a position before. And a couple things that are going on in town that I don't have to tell you folks about: the development and the increased pressures on all the departments to meet the needs to address new facilities coming online. We, of course, inspect and license restaurants and cosmetology salons, and there's quite a few of them on the books now. Here's a cheat sheet that we've been managing to keep track of proposals, and that doesn't include any of the properties that may, or the development that may occur over where the Palmer's project is. And it certainly doesn't include everything downtown. Part of what's pushing this for us to make it sooner rather than later is the fact that the person who does our plan reviews for all these new facilities has told me that she intends to leave at some point in the very near future. She's working part-time and all she does is plan reviews. That's going to be a huge problem for us if we don't have somebody to fill that role sooner rather than later. The other problem that we're having is that we're also faced with a new code and a new inspection process. Connecticut has recently adopted the FDA food code, which is a completely different way of doing inspections. Very time consuming for us because it's a whole new process. And we have to reacclimate ourselves to this new process, working not only with the facilities and explaining the new inspection forms, but also trying to get ourselves on the same page as here in the office. So we have grant fund that would make up the difference between what was budgeted for the mid-year hire. It's a workforce development fund from the state that could be used to supplement existing staff. So our proposal is to get somebody on board sooner rather than later.
And David, this person would do the scheduling too?
Pardon me?
Would they do the scheduling of meetings of the body that you're losing, that's leaving?
Well,
How do they fill that void?
I'm hoping that this person would have that level of expertise. And that, you know, the person that we're losing is truly an expert in the field. And plan review process, you know, you're looking at the blueprints and, you know, understanding what the equipment is, where it's going to be and how it's going to work, and understanding food flow throughout the facility. Yeah, this person, we work, it's plans, it's back and forth with plans and communication, but yes, that would be the role this person would do. Hopefully there'll be some overlap time so that there would be some training, because that's critical.
Do you have any idea how large the pool of candidates might be, or are there any candidates?
That's a good question. There's a huge demand right now for qualified people in this field. So I'm not sure what kind of success we're going to have. I'm thinking that people would want to, like the police department, you hear people want to come to Darien because it's such a great place to work and be. I'm hoping that helps us, you know, but there's definitely a shortage of qualified people, and those who have the experience a lot of them are retiring. I don't know what we're going to find when we advertise the position.
David, should we assume this grant is a one-time grant?
This is a one-time grant. Yes.
But this was also a part of the budget, right? Like,
Yes.
And so
Yes.
we're appropriating more funds to move the timing up?
Just
Like,
to
we
move the
can't
timing up.
advertise the position without funding it.
If I understood correctly, they budgeted for a mid-year hire.
Yes.
So the 55,000 general fund budget number that you see on the sheet there, that's for a half a year.
Correct.
So it's already budgeted in at 110 total, but they needed some extra money to be able to hire before mid-year.
So adding this person now isn't going to cost the town any money. we'd be using the grant to supplement it. So the money is there. The state has promised that the money has to be delivered to us in November. So we don't have it yet, but it's coming.
So I guess, can I ask a question? So just thinking back through the budget, right? We had one, what we called like professional technical, one additional FTE that was going to come in, right?
In January.
I thought we had budgeted, when I looked at the FTEs here.
The FTE count is position-based, not based on what portion of the year.
Got it.
Because it's
was
a
a
full-time
full-time,
position, but just funded for half the year.
Got it.
And I assume we only get the grant money if we find someone and hire them, right?
No, we get the grant money.
No matter what.
So that's why I want to hire somebody, because that money's coming to us, workforce development. If I don't hire somebody,
We're
I
gonna
can
it
do
back.
something. I have a couple years to figure out what to do with it, but I need that person.
Yeah.
We need that person.
And we're getting it because the state.
Everybody's getting it. Every municipality's getting this. It's a CDC grant. I think it's kind of a carryover from all the great work we did with COVID. And so the CDC is acknowledging the efforts of local health departments and saying, maybe we've underfunded health departments for a long time, and maybe we need to kind of promote and give towns and municipalities some extra funding for workforce development. And there's a whole bunch of other things that the money could be used for beside hiring somebody. But for us, the most logical thing to use that money for is for this position so that this work could get done. But that money's coming anyway, and it's going to every municipality.
Okay. Can I just ask a mere procedural question, right? And I listened to one of the advisory committee meetings, I think where you discussed about a lot of the sources of funds that you have, various grants, and some of the needs that you thought you had. With respect to the public health workforce development grants, so you think that's coming soon? It's been awarded, we just haven't received the cash yet.
Correct.
Okay. Does the Board of Finance need to approve the use of that grant? Or, because just listening to the advisory committee meeting 3 or 4 weeks ago, it sounded like a lot of these grants that you get, you can just use for stuff. You don't necessarily, doesn't need to be moved through the appropriation committee. So that's what I'm just trying to understand in terms of.
Right, so most of the grants that we get are very specific, especially the ones that public health gets. They are very specific on what you can do with them. And the town's process on grants has been, if the grant is for a specific purpose or we really don't have discretion on how it can be used, we don't go through all of the bodies because the grant prescribes what we can use. For this particular grant, because it is just workforce development and it's involving positions, Kate and I were back and forth because we weren't comfortable just saying add a position earlier than budgeted. But it's also workforce development specifically for public health, so it doesn't necessarily need the full appropriation process, which is why this is just a position authorization request.
It's not a funding request, it's a position authorization request.
Yeah.
And it's the acceleration of the position.
Of the position, right.
Not, right, okay.
And so we assumed we were going to have this position for a half year. And so when I'm looking at these transfers right here, there's like a 56.
So it's not a transfer, it's
What's that?
funding. The funding source for the position will be $55,000 from the general fund, which is already in the budget. And then $38,000 from this grant, assuming the person starts September 1st.
But I was saying, like, during the budget process, we knew that we were spending $55,000 in this budget process, but we knew that was only for a half year, so we knew that the following year, ceteris paribus, it would be 110.
Right.
So we kind of made that decision already, that this was going to be a permanent position. So it's really just we're accelerating it. We're not making any different spending, not costing tax dollars anymore. We're not approving any additional FTEs and so forth. We're just hiring one 4 months early, and
Right.
you're gonna use workforce funds to approve it.
Right, and normally, we
fund.
wouldn't
Fund it.
bring forward a request to fund a position with a short-term grant like this, but because it's just bridging until we get to what was agreed upon as a permanent full position budgeted, it made sense to use this as something to bridge that time.
Okay. And then in terms of the amount of money that was in the fiscal '24 budget for the current position, you said somebody's leaving?
Yes.
How much was associated, is that part-time position going to be replaced?
No.
Or is it going to be replaced with this one? So I guess my question is, if that individual were to leave in a month, how much money is freed up inside the fiscal '24 budget as a result of that?
So we assumed that the part-time position would be vacant when this full-time position started. So we budgeted a half a year of the part-time and a half a year of the full-time. So if the person were to leave, I don't remember what the total dollars are.
I don't
for that
remember what the
position.
total dollars is, but my understanding is this person will not be there come the first of the year. So it really kind of fits in perfectly with the scenario that we've planned for.
Okay. And is the 38,000, is that all, what's the total of that grant that we expect to receive? Is it just that amount?
No, it's a little bit more than that.
But it could be used
I don't
for
have the grant amount.
workforce development anywhere in the town.
I think it's public health
It's
specific.
specific
Oh,
for
okay.
public health.
Okay.
It's directed to the health departments in the town. So that is not the full amount. The full amount is 46 and change.
Is there a reason not to push it up even further? And
It has to do with the other sanitarian position and the amount of money that's available for the positions. Now, Kate had a formula for that.
And also, we assume September 1st, because by the time we post the job, let it be advertised for a few
Yeah,
weeks,
it's gonna
interview,
be-
all that, we don't expect to be able to get anybody on board until September 1st. If we had a
If we're
great
lucky.
candidate walk in the door tomorrow
right.
and we can move on it, we would hire earlier as
Right.
long as it was within the amount of the
Right.
grant that we have.
And you said there are spending milestones on these grants, that you have to use them in a certain amount of time?
We will not have any problem spending this money. I think it's 25. 2025.
Got it.
so what's the next best use of those dollars? Like if we don't have, what projects compete for these dollars? Like if you don't
I don't even
find
want to
someone-
think about that. We need the position. I mean,
Right, but
really.
if you can't find someone.
Well, we're going to try to fill the gap somehow. We have to have staff. I don't want to spend, I have the 3 years to spend it, so I don't want to just spend it. We need staffing, and if it takes longer than
Right.
September to find this position, then that's what we'll do. If we have to bump up the salaries, perhaps we could use this money to pay higher salaries to supplement the salaries that were there.
Yep.
It depends, it really depends.
Yeah, maybe where Taylor was going and where I was going is that, does it make sense to use the entire grant first, which you said is, a little bit more than this, and then tap into amounts for the general fund, just to make sure that we're using the grants?
My guess is that we won't fill the position for this amount.
But that's a
Based
longer
on
term
what I
decision.
know with what's going on with hiring in adjacent jurisdictions. But we have some flexibility to add money to it, and we will use all the money at some point. Right now, what we're only asking for is just an approval from this board to go ahead and hire this person or this position, fill this position, so that we could get moving on planning and getting the work done that needs to get done.
Okay.
But do you have the flexibility to use these funds to hire someone for more than 110,000 if that's what we budgeted for?
Well, we can't spend more money than we have, so we would use the grant the best way we could. And that could be to perhaps supplement the existing sanitarian salary. I don't know, however it works out best. We have $46,000 to work with in this grant.
My concern is if we budgeted for the position to be 110,000 and you say, oh, well, couldn't find anybody until November, I have some more money, I'm gonna offer the job at 135,000 instead, like, do you come back to us and ask for that? Because that's a long-term, like, stream.
I would be working totally with Jen and with Kate on whatever we do with hiring and whatever situations we run into before we come back if we have to.
Okay, well, so in terms of approving this, all we're really doing, although I don't think we need our technical approval, is we're just saying we approve and acknowledge hiring it today, the employee today rather than on January 1st.
Correct.
And you're going to cover that cost with the grant, and if you can't hire the person for this amount, then you would use additional grant funds.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to, as laid out here in the menu, on the menu, on the agenda, to transfer or to utilize $38,822 from the Public Health Workforce Development Grant to accelerate the hiring of this FTE. Paul moves, Dan seconds. All those in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, David.
Thanks. Okay, so the next one is discuss and take action on the request to close $2,402,990.58 of ARPA project funds out to ARPA contingency.
So the ARPA committee, reconstituted ARPA committee, which includes Jim and Dan, met last week, and we talked through a couple of things. We have kind of three classes of projects right now. Some small, easy ones that are done, complete, and they have little odds and ends of money left unspent. We have some projects that, because of the scope of them, we don't think that the full projects will be able to meet the ARPA spending commitment and spending deadlines. Those are bigger drainage projects, so we're looking to close out portions of those. And then there are projects that are appropriated in ARPA or were appropriated in the budget that we need to allocate additional ARPA funds to because the budgets were insufficient. So the first step is closing out the complete projects and the large projects that we don't think are going to make the ARPA timeline. So those are on the summary sheet that you have. Highlighted in gray are all of the ones that we're looking to close out. The big ones that are contributing the majority of the money, because it's about $2.4 million that we're closing out, are the drainage improvements for Grove and Tilly and the drainage improvements for Saltbox. We are looking to leave $250,000 in each of those to cover design work. But in speaking with Ed, with everything that is involved, he doesn't think that the projects would be able to meet the commitment deadline of December 2024 and expenditure deadline of December 2026. So we'd rather reallocate those to something that can be done in the timelines.
Adding to that is almost $400,000 of unneeded appropriation for the Old King Highway South.
Right.
Pipelining. So that project is almost complete.
Right.
So that's money where we set aside $1 million and he needed about 600,000 instead to do that. So that money's getting returned to the pot. The other two, as Jen said, are the projects are going to be more complicated and longer in tenor than ARPA is set up to commit and fund. We have to have the money spent by year in 26, correct?
Right.
Committed by 24, year in
Spent by
24,
26.
and spent, entirely spent
Yep.
by 2026.
Are we convinced enough that they're actually going to get done to even spend the $500,000 to do the design?
I think Ed is very confident that those can be done in the timeline.
Well, not the timeline, but do we want to fund them?
Well, personally, I think, this past weekend and the events of the last 5 years, I think flooding and drainage is a huge town priority. And I think personally, it would be, it'd be remiss if we didn't fund the design phase of addressing those issues for the neighbors severely impacted by those issues.
Can I ask a question, Jen, just to understand like where we are in the process right here, right? The Board of Selectmen met this morning. It was an 8:30 a.m. meeting. And one of their items was to discuss and take allocation on proposed reallocation of ARPA money. So what I think we're being asked to do here is, if I'm correct, just move stuff to contingency.
This is the first part of it.
Yeah.
The second part is the reallocation from contingency out to the other projects.
Right,
that
and we
need more.
approved, by the way, we did approve these items a year ago, 15 months ago. So this board approved this ARPA schedule in March of 2022, which included funding these drainage projects. So now we're scaling back that funding to fund just the design phase of those projects.
I guess that's what I don't understand, like for example purposes here, right? We had our ARPA meeting, was that last Thursday? Thursday?
Mhm.
Right? The Board of Selectmen, as I understand it this morning, approved moving forward on salt box.
Well, there were two things that I think the Board of Selectmen did this morning. They approved the reallocation of the ARPA funds, and they approved the moving forward on the design phase of salt box.
Right.
Okay?
So I guess my question is, if we're moving forward on the design phase on that, why would we not use some of the ARPA funds for that?
We are, 250.
We are.
We're leaving 250.
But I'm saying, but if we're going to do the design, I expect that means that we're going to do the project?
I don't think
Because
it's going
the
to not make the time.
concern is that the construction
time.
portion can't be committed and spent within the ARPA time.
Which is
Before
2026.
2026?
It has to be committed by 2024, and if there's any deep permitting or federal permitting required, that can be a very lengthy
I don't think Ed wants to be constricted by this deadline on a project of this magnitude. So there'll be artificial deadlines imposed on him because of the source of the funding that may or may not comport with what the project should actually require.
But, and those deadlines are basically 18 months from today, right?
It has to be committed in
Committed.
18 months.
Yes.
We have to have it has to be fully contracted and committed.
And I just, not to be difficult, but the ARPA committee approved this, and the Board of Selectmen approved it this morning, that we would move in this direction.
I thought the ARPA committee approved only transferring this 495,000.
No, what the ARPA committee did was approve the reallocation of 2.4 million from the existing schedule and the additional spending of what you just mentioned, the 495, which were projects not anticipated to be funded under ARPA, but were projects that were anticipated to be funded under the capital budget and that were
Well, a combination. Some are in ARPA
Okay.
and need more, and then there were
Yes,
the two
yes.
vehicles that were in the.
So how much-
additional monies for existing ARPA projects plus a few new projects.
So how much money will we have? I guess we didn't get the report from the ARPA meeting, but how much money will be left in contingency
If you
after
close-
all of these reallocations and new allocations?
Well, if you close this out, you're gonna have 2.5 million in ARPA contingency. And then the next item is to then take 495,000 out of there, so you'll have
$2
just over
million.
2 million.
But I think if the cost is going to exceed what was originally planned and the timing is going to exceed, it's gonna end up being a burden on taxpayers to do the project, so I'm not sure I'm on board for doing the projects. I'm not sure that it makes sense to spend money even to design it if we're not sure we're gonna actually execute.
Okay, but we already approved that.
We
15
approved spending ARPA money.
Correct.
I'm
Which
not
is all
approving taxpayer dollars.
we're not committing any taxpayer dollars tonight. We're committing, well, first of all,
Well,
ARPA fund
in
money
theory we are.
is taxpayer money.
Yeah.
No, all we're doing is, we're actually saying, of the $2.4 million we were gonna spend, or whatever the numbers were on the 3 drainage projects, out of ARPA, one is complete, came in $400,000 less than we expected, and the other 2, we're actually scaling back the amount we're spending out of ARPA to just the design phase, which is instead of, whatever the numbers are, instead of 2.5 million, we're gonna spend 500,000 out of ARPA money, freeing up $2 million. Now, that $2 million, we may choose to reallocate that back into the drainage studies when we hear more from Ed, if we have the time to do it. But
But I guess the question is, this morning, did the Board of Selectmen, because one would think you wouldn't approve the design work unless you were willing to go forward with the whole project.
Right.
So I guess my question is, this morning, did they approve going forward with the whole project?
No, because there's no project to approve.
there's no project to approve.
They can't, I mean, I think in theory, they may say we support
Yeah.
No,
the drainage,
but to
the
be-
concept of a drainage project.
But to be clear,
but
we
there's no
commit
project to
dollars
approve.
to study things frequently. And we make it very clear when someone requests us money for a study that we're not committing to what the study may recommend. We do that multiple times a year. This is
But I
analogous to
thought we
that.
did, but didn't we already spend money? I thought we have an entire study and we had a 2-hour presentation on that study, the proposed plan, the estimated cost and everything related to everything to do with salt box.
That was the study. What we're talking about now is the design. What would it,
The design
the design
wouldn't-
of the solution so that we can have an idea
Board
of
of
how
Selectmen
much the
Zagrodzky
final project
asked
would cost.
This design phase includes permitting and things like that, that move forward, that actually get beyond and start executing the project on salt box. So the salt box approval this morning anticipated some permitting and associated with that project.
Well, it's
Not
because-
just a piece of paper that is read somewhere.
No, but I guess we have estimated costs, right? Of the project?
From a study, not full design documents.
Okay, I thought the solution seemed like it was fairly well designed, what needed to do as part of that whole presentation.
I think there's a big difference between what's been received and actually the engineering design work.
Yeah.
That actually, this is the kind of pipe you need, and this is where it needs to go, and this is how much linear feet of it you need, and this is et cetera, et cetera, et
I
cetera.
think
et cetera.
in talking in terms of other construction stuff around, for the school projects, we had the design development phase, which was, here's generally what we want to do, here's generally what we think it will cost. And then we had to go to effectively the construction documents, right? Which lay out all the specifics of every spec, of every piece of equipment and timing and phasing and all those other kinds of things. That's the portion of the study that I think we're going to do with the $250,000.
But I think with the school, we had approved the entire project.
Only because we
The
had to.
appropriation for the entire amount for the grant.
For the state grant.
Yeah.
With the garage, the DPW garage was the first time that we used the model of do the design first, get the construction documents, then approve the construction budget because you have a much better number. We just aren't able to do that on the school projects because we have to
Because the
appropriate the
state
full amount in order
requires
to apply for the grant.
differently.
Yeah,
And,
well, we knew we needed a new school too, like I was never asked to vote on.
but we did approve, actually, 15 months ago, we approved using, what's the number?
1.5.
$3.5 million of ARPA funding for these 3 projects, not just the design phase. We approved, this board approved this list, which included $3.5 million funding of these
Yep.
projects. So now we're basically saying, one project is nearly done. The other 2 projects may be more complicated, more time-consuming than we initially thought. We just want to approve the design phase of those 2 remaining projects.
But to execute
We're not
these-
committing to, we're actually not committing to fund the projects, even though 15 months ago, we did commit to funding the project. So,
But we committed to funding it with ARPA dollars, and now
Yes.
to execute, we're gonna be taxing people for it.
we don't know. But we know that, I guess we know on one of them that the estimated cost is likely to come
It's
in.
very
Yes.
significant, yeah.
Yes,
It's
but
kinda-
we're not committing those dollars.
Right, so if it's very significant and we're gonna be asked to make the decision at some point, like I don't want the frog to be boiling in hot water and, feel like, oh, well, I'm only improving the study, I'm only improving the design, and then suddenly, well, we've spent $500,000 doing this, now we're obligated to do it.
But if
No,
we
I
don't spend the
I'm not sure I wanna
$500,000,
do this.
if we don't spend the $500,000, then we won't know what's needed to be spent.
Yeah,
We can't get to the point where we're voting on whether to fund the project without a design phase. We're using ARPA money to fund the design phase rather than using the Darien resident tax money to fund the design phase.
It seems as though where maybe some of the question is that this study that was done, produced a cost, right? That was, I guess, like what, 3.5x, 4x what we were originally assuming.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's an estimate, I think, provided by the company that did the study.
Which we're talking about salt tax?
Yeah.
So like over $6 million?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is this, I don't know that we should completely ignore that number. If that number is, we should have a sense in terms of if the boards are prepared to spend that money.
Right. And what cost is being borne by the town versus individual homeowners? Like, how are we being impacted? I need to know a lot more before I get excited about spending any dollars, ARPA or not.
I'm really troubled by the notion that we're signaling that we're nervous about funding requisite drainage improvements to the town.
I don't think
that's what I'm hearing that, so I'm concerned about that.
Well, my question is, we've had, I guess, a study, not a design study, but we've had a study come out and say we expect it to be this. And so I guess the question is, should we be making sure that all boards are supportive of actually spending that dollar amount, which could be higher or lower than what the last study actually suggested, before we spend $250,000 designing it?
And I wouldn't necessarily call it requisite. I mean, we can't, we started on the slippery slope back on Crimmins, and we need to stop it at some point, because it's not our job to be spending dollars to remediate flooding for every homeowner in town. So I need to know that there's like a town-wide reason to spend $6 million, and we're spending and spending and spending and spending.
Okay, we're not spending no one's asking us to commit those dollars tonight. We approved $3.5 million for these projects tonight, or 15 months ago. We're curtailing that request back.
Yeah, but I don't think that's necessarily fair, because if you're committing a significant amount of money to a study, you should, and you have an estimate of what that study is, I just think we should make sure that most boards are on board with spending that money, because what would be a shame is to spend $250,000 designing and then people not support the $6 million.
I think what would be a greater shame is not to spend the $250,000 to figure out how to fix the problem. And then
we have more time to prove that we need to do that, right? I mean,
yeah. I guess what I just don't understand is, why didn't the Board of Selectmen approve an appropriation for $6 million?
Because they don't have a project
to
approve.
Until there's a formal design. I mean, the formal design
you need to do the design to figure out what the project's going to cost.
The design can change materially from what was in that prior presentation.
And is the company we have doing the design work, is that different than the company that did the study?
No, I believe it's
the same
intended to be
exact
the same.
people. So the same exact people that came in and did, and I think we spent $60,000.
Because a study is different than engineering design.
Yeah.
An engineering design plan is much more in-depth than a study of, here are your flows, here's what we recommend you do to fix it.
And the Board of Selectmen did approve this list this morning.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if they intended not to fund the projects, I would think that they would not have been.
I know, I guess maybe it just feels like it's, do you know how much we spent on the study? Approximately, I thought we had it.
I don't recall.
I think we set that up to be bonded, didn't we?
To allay some of the
No.
fears about future costs of taxpayer, can we take some of the money that is not being spent and spend it on capital needs that have already been identified to take pressure off next year or the following year's budget, and then free
That
them?
is what
That's some of
what
what the
we're
ARPA
doing.
committee
Okay.
started looking at.
Well, what we didn't want to do is signal we're funding capital projects that haven't been thoroughly vetted yet.
Right.
To the
Right,
point
sure.
that both of you are making.
Yeah.
So there are items that were on the list that we approved and to some, in the budget process,
Mhm.
there were also some items that were on the ARPA list that require more funding
Right.
than we initially, and were easily funded through this $500,000. So that was a step in what, Paul, you're
I'm
recommending.
talking about the extra 2 million.
Well,
So-
so there may be projects, but they need to be vetted before we agree to fund them.
And what is the flexibility in using the ARPA funds towards those projects? And do they have to be special in their types of use?
No, because
Okay.
we are using the lost revenue category of
Okay.
ARPA, which can be used for anything that our government would normally have done.
Okay, so we aren't constrained.
So for example, one project that came up in the ARPA committee is the Norotan Heights retaining wall. You guys
Mhm.
approved $100,000 or so, or not, I don't
Oh,
think it was, maybe 50, 40 or 50 for the design,
Right.
so that we can find out what the construction is gonna cost. But we didn't want to come to you and say, let's allocate ARPA monies, because we don't know what the construction cost is. But that
Right.
was one idea that the ARPA committee considered is, let's fund, when we have that number, let's fund the retaining wall.
Yeah.
And Kate did go through the out years of the 5-year capital plan and look at what did we push from '24 to '25? Or is there anything in
Yeah.
'25 or later that maybe we should pull forward?
Mhm.
So those are the types of things that the ARPA
Okay.
committee is gonna be looking at, but they didn't wanna approve, yeah, let's do the retaining wall, when we don't know what the retaining wall is gonna cost, and it hasn't gone to the Board of Selectmen, it hasn't gone to the other bodies.
Can we pull all of it back to contingency for now, and then choose later if we want to reallocate it to design?
Well, I think that's what the Board of Selectmen did. So I think the idea is, or at least I guess my concern, maybe I don't appreciate the difference between spending 60,000 on the study and 250,000 on a design, if it's the same exact people doing this,
It's
same
It's a
company.
much more, design is
It's
much
very
more
different.
involved.
I know.
It's very
So-
different.
It's like
but I guess-
conceptual drawings versus construction.
Right.
Oh, no, understood, but the cost estimate, right, which is 6.5
I don't
or
know.
6.4, I think it was?
I don't recall.
Yeah. I would assume it's directionally right if if the same company is going to design what they just studied and recommended. So, I mean, listen, we already allocated the $1.5 million, so it already could have been used. So the question is, we're voting to take out 1.25 and move it back into contingency and leave 250 in there for them to use as a study. I do think with projects like this, it's a little bit of a slippery slope of spending a lot of money on the design unless we're sort of very much committed to the actual project. And although this is a very different scale, I think that supporting the police department, right, that was a $100,000+ investment to fix the locker rooms, and we basically approved a design budget that was about 40% of the total cost, right? And I think that was because all of us at this table were very, I think that the sense was we're very much in agreement that when the total cost comes, we're gonna fund it, because you wouldn't wanna fund 40% unless you were really committed to fund 100%. Here, we're funding, kind of 5% before funding the remaining 95%, again, just based on the estimate that came out from the company that did the study.
So can we, in one fell swoop, change the amount to be moved to contingency to include the 250 for each of those two projects? So we'd be moving 2.5
Well,
back?
Let me ask Jen, if we, first of all, I'm dead set against that. But if we did do that, where would Ed be with advancing either of these remaining projects?
I don't know, because I don't know how far, because he had an
When it-
appropriation, so he was able to move forward on
Right.
things, and I don't know how
We're
far
rescinding
he's
an
gotten
appropriation?
on
He may-
contracting.
Yeah,
So
he
I'm
may have
sorry.
already spent money to initiate the design phase with,
Or at least to have committed
Yeah.
to it
So I think
contractually. I'm
we're
not
putting
sure
our
where it
Director of
stands.
Public Works in a very tenuous position with respect to this major issue facing the town
Yeah.
by
So-
pulling all of the money back. We're already pulled most of it back.
Yeah. I think the encumbrances column is 0 for both of these, but it doesn't mean he didn't encumber something since this was put together.
Correct.
And even if he hasn't encumbered it, he intends to move forward on these projects because we told him we supported them and funded.
Back when
And
it
then-
was $1.5 million too, not
That
six.
was one of the projects, okay.
We're just talking about one. I mean, you've got to admit, that's a lot more expensive than we thought it was gonna be.
Yes, I do, and I certainly don't want to not fund figuring out what the other project's gonna cost.
My
If you don't-
my concern is if you take it back, then Ed is gonna, what you basically said to Ed is, okay, we had a conceptual drawing that said it was $6.4 million. Now come to us for $6.4 million because we're not gonna fund a further detailed construction level design until you come to get the whole project approved. So you're gonna have a halfway done conceptual drawing of a plan and be asked to approve $6.4 million when we don't know what the final design is going to be and what the actual cost of building that final design will be, right? If it comes, for example, they do the design project for $250,000 and they come back and it's $12.6 million. Well, then it's a slam dunk. No, we're not going to pay for the rest of that, right? They come back and they say, guess what? We found a way to redesign it so that it comes back and it's only $4.2 million. That's a lot different number, right? What you're asking the town to do is approve the full cost of a project with no idea what the final design is going to be.
Did anybody listen to the meeting this morning?
Yes.
And was the sense of the Board of Selectmen that if this was to come out where the company that estimated it as part of the study, and granted that's not the same type of work as a design, that was
So,
the sense
first
that
of-
they would support it if it cost that much?
I'm not going to put words in their mouth. There was a discussion about what the benefit to the town would be of this project. How many residents, Monica was sitting right here, asking how many, if she understood the number of residents that would be benefited, and it was 70. And there was a difference between the degree to which they'd be benefited. One was 29, and then there was 41. The combination was 70. And there was a discussion about a 50-year remedy versus a 100-year remedy. And we're obligated for a 50-year remedy, which accomplishes 94% of what a 100-year remedy would deliver. The difference is some flooding on the street, but none in any homes, okay, so in the 100-year event. So there was that dialogue. But no, they didn't go through the summary, the $6.5 million, what would be, how long would, no, they didn't go through that. But they certainly were moving forward, and again, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but there was a discussion of the benefit of this project to the town, not the benefit of the design portion to the town, the benefit of the project to the town. Is that factual?
I think that's accurate.
Okay.
I mean, I remember sitting here and I'm going back to trying to remember how I felt when we were allocating the ARPA funds to these projects in theory. And I remember us going, but these projects are big nebulous things. Like, how do we know that $1 million or $1.5 million is right? And the idea was, we're going to get started. We're going to do the study so we understand what we're dealing with, and then we're going to make a decision. I never got excited about spending $2.5 million to fix those two things. I was understanding we could reallocate funds if we decided we didn't necessarily want to move forward, that we had this window of time to spend the money how we felt it was most beneficial to the town. I think to Paul's point, I'd be much happier using the ARPA funds for things that we know we aren't going to need to spend the money on and not waste another dollar that we may or may not ever, need to have spent on something we're not sure we're going to fund.
Does this go to the RTM as well?
No, it's already appropriated. So it's just, this is like capital closeouts. You're just shifting around within appropriations.
And has the study produced, I haven't seen an estimate of the Grove and Tilly project, right?
I can't answer that. That would be a question for Ed, where that stands.
Okay, well, I don't know, does anyone, I guess I'll just say my piece is that, I support doing smart projects for flooding, right? do feel like if we're kind of marching down a road to commit significant amount of money towards the design of a project, we should, even if it's an estimate, and I do think there's a lot of time. I think that study took like 4 months, right? It was fairly comprehensive. We should make sure that people are generally on board with the full cost, particularly if it's materially 4 times more. So, I mean, I'm okay leaving behind the 250. And is that what he thinks the estimate is for all the design work? Like,
Yes. He thinks that will get him through the full design phase on each of them.
including permitting and everything?
I'm just paraphrasing what Mr. Zagrodzky asked this morning and what Mr. Gentile responded. Permitting was part of it. I don't know if it's the full amount of permitting,
Yeah.
but it was beyond just, pieces of paper on a desk. It was actually into the execution of the project itself.
Okay. Well, so I'll say I'm comfortable leaving the 250 behind for the design and development. However, I would convey to the Board of Selectmen, and I will send Monica an email, that I do think, and I'm just using the permitting as an example. Let's do the design, but let's not go further than designing it and actually start getting the permits until we approve the entire amount, because if for some reason they didn't, I'd hate to, I want to take it as far as we need to be able to get the costs, and again, using David's phraseology, be able to construct the building, the construction documents, and get a real cost estimate of what we think this is. But in terms of permitting and beginning to actually commit funds to the project, let's make sure we get the whole thing approved before we
Do that.
do
I'm
that.
fine with that.
That
I'm
makes
fine with
sense.
that.
That makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think ideally, I'd love to be sitting, looking at all, well, I guess the old Kings Highway project is pretty much done,
Pretty
right?
much by
Yeah.
that.
But on both of these, both the Grove Street and Tilly, I'd love to be able to have a number, even if it was only from a study, of what that other one looked like. Because if that was, off by a similar context, those are
Big numbers.
those are big numbers, and I feel like it puts us all as boards in a situation where we need to think about, well, what if we couldn't do both? So,
We're definitely moving down the field. I mean, he's gonna get the design work done and spend the $500,000, and then we may very well be in a position to say, yeah, we just wasted $500,000 because we don't wanna move forward with these projects. And meanwhile, we could have spent $500,000 on something else.
I don't think
That hasn't
our
been
Director of Public
identified
Works.
I'm sure we can find something.
I don't think our Director of Public Works is gonna spend money, even though he has it budgeted, unless he feels like he's going to have a project that is supported by the town.
And so I would love to have him come and prove that we should do it before this window closes so that we could still fund the design if we all got on board with that. But, because when is that window closing again? I'm sorry. I know you said
December
it.
24. We have to have it committed by December 24.
Okay,
Of
there's lots of
24,
time.
right?
it's 24, so 18 months.
So there's also opportunity to revisit if we learn more information. He's not, as far as I know, he's not moving forward today. So I think we need, I'm very uncomfortable pulling funding away from a Director of Public Works that is working diligently to solve these drainage issues and flooding issues in town. But knowing who that is, he is someone that makes sure that he's supported before he's spending money, whether he has an authorization or not. So I can't imagine if he comes up with a study on these other projects that is materially more than what is expected, that he won't be communicating that. And we'll have additional opportunities to revisit. But I'm very hesitant, we're already reducing these allocations significantly. I'm very hesitant to reduce them to zero.
Well, I don't think reducing, just say publicly, I don't think reducing the amount for these means we're not putting forward. We're just saying we're reducing the amount of ARPA funds that are going to go towards it, because the money in here isn't enough to actually do the project. So I guess here, I think we should probably call the question and just, and have a vote on this. What I will commit to do is talk to Monica and make sure that, as is indicated here in the notes, that let's keep this to the design of the projects and figure out how much they cost, and not into like the permitting and actually starting the project.
But is there not an opportunity to hear from Ed and decide whether or not we are comfortable moving forward, at least with the design, before he spends more money? Like,
Well, I
I'm
guess
certainly not gonna leave him
the
high and
answer-
dry, and I have all the faith in
Yeah.
the world and support for Ed Gentile. It has nothing to do with him.
Yeah, I think the answer to that, Taylor, unfortunately, is not tonight, because I didn't ask Ed to come.
Yeah. Oh, I don't
and-
mean tonight either. I mean,
and-
we've got
and I-
18 months.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could always, if we left 250 behind and we felt like we found out more information and we didn't want to, we could propose that to the Board of Selectmen to reduce it more. So I'm okay with this, delivering that message, and what I will do is I think it's August 12th, whatever our next meeting is, I'll ask Ed to come and give us an update on exactly where the design and development starts and stops, and maybe give us an update on the other projects, just in terms of
That would be beneficial.
when we can understand kind of what the study would be for the other.
Is he looking at all drainage projects in town? Because this goes back to Taylor's question, I think. We approved, call it $2.5 million here, right? If one of them was 6.5, at least 6.4, are we looking at 6, 16, or 60 to do this entire town? And maybe that's outside the scope of everything we talked about. But it seems like we always get pockets of trouble areas, I'll call them that, right? So I don't know if, and maybe this is a question when Ed comes and we ask him, maybe it's worth just a full-scale study, or at least a look of everything. Like, have we ever fixed Heights? Heights is still in play, isn't it?
Yeah, well, Rob,
Or
what I
All the
do,
money's been approved for Heights. There were 3 elements of that project. 2 of them were completed. The third one we already approved, which was funding for the retention system underneath the
Right,
parking lot.
Right, that's right.
Right? That's all been funded and approved. Do we know that it will work? We had the year that the Heights most recently flooded was the year that we had the 100 and 500-year storms within a month of each other, right? And I don't think any system is going to stop that completely, but the Heights project will be completed. There's no anticipation of further work to be done there that I'm aware of.
but they did put a 950,000 gallon retention.
They put a
Like underneath.
950,000 gallon retention, and unfortunately, the storms were so severe that it exceeded that capacity.
Yeah. And Rob, to your point, as a result, on the heels of all that flooding, Ed went and looked at every area in town where people sort of identified flooding, and he went through 50 or so different areas, and these were the 3 where he saw there had been a history of issues, where he looked at where there could be issues, where things could be fixed. And that's why we appropriated. These were the 3 that he thought were, I don't want to say worthy, but
Most
were
troublesome.
true
I get it.
identified.
The highest priority.
Highest
Yeah,
priority.
it's sort of like Intervale at one point kept flooding, right? We remediated that.
Right.
Opened up some more space, it's dumping into one of the rivers. Sounds like Heights is almost done, right? So we're kind of going through just I hate to say a checklist,
Yeah.
but what causes the most problems, damage, whatever you want to call it, that's fine, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. I just kind of want to hear it. If it's just these 3 at the top, and if there's smaller ones behind it, let's just find out. I would like to find out at least, right? I think the thing that's sticker shock for me, once again, is a little bit to Taylor's point. If it's going from $1.5 million, and maybe this was just a dart throw, right? We were just trying to get funds committed, but 1.5 to 6 is a pretty good, discrepancy.
Well, then if you add them all up and you look at how many homeowners are affected, I mean, what are we spending? Like you said, 6, 16, 60 to impact a few hundred homeowners. Like, does the rest of the town want to write that check? I'm not voting for that.
Well, I would vote for public roads, even if I never drive over them. If the town, then I would vote for drainage that benefits
Well, that's the
homeowners.
thing, it benefits the
that-
whole town, or there's a town, like the town parking lot or something, then it's a town asset, and that's the remediation for the town, not for individual homeowners.
I think it's the infrastructure of the town, but we can have that conversation when we're asked to fund the project.
Right, I agree.
Okay, so,
I'm comfortable right now with this.
yeah.
Not thrilled, but I'm comfortable with it.
I'll get Ed to come back in front of us, and I'll relay to the Board of Selectmen that,
Yep.
things like permitting should not be included. It should get the design fund, design done, and then come back for the full amount. So,
Comfortable with that.
so if I could, I'll call for a motion to, just so the public has this, we're gonna transfer $267 and change out of the drone, $425 from the rescue jacks, as both those purchases are complete. We're gonna fund everything, we're gonna transfer, everything but $250,000 from the Grove drainage improvement project, and everything but $250 from the salt box drainage improvement. And then for the Old Kings Highway, how much are we?
$395.
$395.
$395, because we only spent $41,000 there.
No, we spent $551 so far, with
Sorry,
another $41
$551.
encumbered.
We're estimating 592 against the million. 550 of which has been spent, 40 of which is yet to be spent.
And then some other
400,
potential
yeah.
small expenses that may come through.
Yeah. Okay, so for a total of 2.402 million.
There's a couple on the back of the page, or the next page, if you want to list them all.
Yeah. The 68 from the senior tablet loan program at the library, $7,222 from the COVID vaccine clinics, and $6 from picnic tables. So total of $2,402,990.58. So I'll accept the motion to transfer those amounts to contingency.
So moved.
Dan moves.
Second.
Dave seconds. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, 5-1. So now the next step here is out of that money to discuss and take action on proposed reallocation of ARPA funding.
Right. So the ARPA committee identified $495,500 worth of reallocation. So on the second page of Kate's memo is the list of projects. We're looking to move $495,500 from contingency to several that were already approved as ARPA projects but require more money. That's the website upgrade, needs $15,000. Personal protection gear, that's the POD in a box, requires $18,000. The new paddle court at Weed requires $30,000. Joint and mortar repair at Norotan Heights requires $35,000. Bridge repair for Old Kings Highway South, $35,000. Auditorium and meeting room upgrades, $80,000. And bridge repair for Rings End Road needs $110,000. Then the last two on this list, the fire marshal vehicle and the EMS fly car, were actually funded from the fiscal '24 budget. And what the ARPA committee is looking to do is fund the projects, the purchases out of ARPA and free up funds within RFCNRE, which we can then move back to the capital reserve.
And Jen, absent the fire marshal and the EMS fly car, the amounts that are here are the incremental amounts needed
To complete.
to complete the projects. There were prior funds previously approved under ARPA for these projects, but the ultimate cost is higher.
Correct.
Got it.
What, is that the high school auditorium?
No, the one downstairs.
Oh, okay. And what's a fly car?
That's EMS's kind of first response car. It's usually like a SUV to respond.
It's not a George
It
Jetson.
doesn't fly.
You're thinking exactly what I was thinking. I was like, I'd like to see this.
For only $95,000.
I want one.
That's pretty cheap.
For 95, I want one.
And Jen, is there a reason why at this meeting we wouldn't also transfer those same amounts back to the capital contingency account, or do they automatically go in there?
They won't go automatically. This is just strictly timing because ARPA met Thursday morning and I had to get this out to you guys and out to Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
So expect it in August.
Right. And also, you know, this way we'll approve it, it's clean, done, and then we'll do the next step.
Okay. Any questions?
No.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to reallocate $495,500 from the ARPA contingency account to these items listed on page 4 of our agenda. Rob moves. Dave seconds. All those in favor? Unanimous.
Is the Hanson project looking long enough to put it on there at some point? Don't we have to repair Hanson Road?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it like in the list somewhere?
I don't think it's,
I don't think the design is that far
the
along.
design's not, I think the estimate was like $1.5 million or something like that. That was an estimate.
There we go.
I thought,
But I don't think Ed felt comfortable that he had a solid enough estimate that he could bring it forward as a
Correct.
project for approval at this time.
Just yet, right.
Dan, what were the other two items, and maybe Dan and Jen can refresh my memory, that we did, that the ARPA committee gave a sense of supporting using ARPA funds for? One was the garage.
The
for
garage
Public Works.
floor.
The garage floor at Public Works, right?
The Norotan Heights retaining wall, and there was some talk, if there aren't other grant funds available, the additional landscaping at,
Train station.
no.
No,
Was it?
behind,
The
behind Town
Highland, thank
Hall.
you.
Highland, yes.
At Highland?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
And
I
I have
thought-
two
I thought you
vehicles
meant
here
Edgerton.
too. Did you just mention that?
Other
They're
than
on
the
the
EMS
list.
They're already on
and,
the list, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
And the fire marshal.
marshal's fire car.
Yeah, okay.
so the ARPA committee was supportive of those other projects, but they recognize that they're not yet
Vetted.
firm enough and vetted through, firm enough to bring to the boards and then vetted by the boards before the ARPA committee really would say, yes, let's go for it.
I think one of them was like the Public Works garage. That hadn't
The
even
floor,
come
yeah.
in front of the Board of Selectmen yet.
Right.
And it was a big number, almost 800,000.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, financial report?
What you have in front of you is activity through June of 2023. So auditors are on site this week for preliminary work, so we are still running AP for fiscal '23, finishing up final entries for fiscal '23 with the intention to close the books at the beginning of August. I don't think there's any big surprises on here for you. Property tax collections finished up at 99.73% versus 99.79. Kathy did mention in this morning's Board of Selectmen meeting that there are a couple of properties with liens that are expected to convey soon, so she'll be first in line once they do convey. So we'll get some of the outstanding money. Investment income is actually finishing up the year about $1.8 million better than budget. Speaking with the treasurer, she did say that there were a few kind of one-time windfalls in there, particularly when we had some significant bond funds sitting in the bank, but now as things are paid and drawn down, we don't have the same balance available in that account to earn interest. But the T-bills have worked very well for us. Intergovernmental revenue, $850,000 better than budget, and a portion of that is for the last time that we have to credit town aid road to the general fund, even though it's budgeted in RFC and RE, is the bulk of that, and the other is the prior year adjustment for ECR that we receive in ECS. But overall, on the revenue side, we are in a very good position. On the expenditure side, these are all tracking as they have been throughout the year. Overall, we expect the Board of Ed to have about an $800,000 surplus. PD, I think, is going to end up around 400, 450. That's primarily because of vacancies. And we're going to have a significant surplus in employee benefits resulting from those vacancies. And Public Works is going to have a pretty significant surplus too. They carried a vacancy or two throughout the year, and they've had some other positive variances. So overall, I would say we're going to add about $2 to $2.5 million to fund balance at the end of this year. And that's going to keep us around 17.8% of the fiscal '24 budget, which we've been hovering between 16, 17, 18.
How does that compare to your estimate during the budget season?
I don't know. I think it's better. It's better. We were pretty conservative during budget. We certainly did not anticipate 1.8 million better than budget on investment income.
Right.
So that's a significant variance there. Board of Ed is about the same, but at the time that I did that projection, I really did assume that anything that the departments had already encumbered would be spent, but now they're starting to close those out because they didn't need all of those encumbrances, so that gives us a little positive variance too.
Hey, Jen, do you think final numbers for June at the August meeting or September meeting?
August will be...
Our meeting, I should say.
August will be pretty final. The one piece that's going to be a little bit odd is at your last meeting you approved that special appropriation of $680,000 to clean up the town aid road grant appropriated from fund balance, send it back over to RFC and RE to make that whole. That needs RTM approval, and they don't meet again until September. So I got to talk with the auditors and ask them if they actually want me to book the interfund transfer, assuming it's going to be approved, or if they want me to hold off. I don't anticipate it won't be approved, but it's just going to be kind of an outstanding item when we do close. Other than that, by, let's see, your guys are August 12th, we should have like 99.9% final numbers by then.
Great.
Moving on, contingency and unassigned fund balance. Right now, fiscal 23, we still have about $205,000 left in our general contingency and about $215,000 left in the salary increase contingency. Some of that may go over to the police department. I need to look at how their contract settled and how exactly we want to true up their salary accounts, if we want to move anything from contingency to cover some of the contract provisions. But I have to see how their final salary numbers come through. And currently in your Board of Finance capital reserve, you have $491,000, but that'll go up quite a bit next month when we move the fly car and fire marshal vehicle budgets back. Sewer fund is ending the year pretty well. We still have some interfund transfers to make in there, but overall I expect some increase to fund balance for the sewer fund. And parking fund, we also expect that there will be an increase to fund balance, which is good because that decreased quite a bit during COVID. Usage of the pay stations has been ticking up, so we're at about $41,000 per month average over the last 6 months. Pre-pandemic, we were at $48,000. Ticketing is still pretty low, but we do have our 2 parking rangers now, so that should be increasing. They're looking. The recreation program fund is going to end up right around where we thought. We expected a transfer of $275,000 over to the general fund, and that's just about where it's tracking right now. They'll have their final invoices coming through, but we'll be pretty close on that one. And Great Island Management, we can see some building rent coming in. Those started coming in for June when our leases began. And then so did our facility repair and maintenance expenses. Active bonded projects, there's really nothing to note. They're moving along. I think HHR might go a little bit slower than what we had anticipated, so I think it's good that we only issued bond anticipation notes on those.
And I'm sorry, Jen, on page 11, the homes roof, skylight, Hanley roof replacement, and town hall heating improvements, those are gonna all get closed out?
The town hall heating improvements is almost complete. Yeah, I have to update the estimated completion date. I think they've been testing the system throughout the year in the different seasonal conditions, just to make sure it's okay. So that's almost complete. The home's roof and skylight and the Hindley roof replacements, the actual projects are complete. but they have not yet closed out with the state and gotten our final grant amount. So I'm trying to give that a little bit more time, because once we know the final grant amount, we can transfer unused bond proceeds from both of those over to another Board of Ed project.
Okay, so that's waiting on grant data from the state.
Yep, we,
Got
if we don't hear about it by the end of the year, we'll probably just go ahead and transfer based on their estimates, and we may have to do some cleanup afterwards, but we're bumping into a deadline for how long we have to transfer unused bond proceeds.
So Jen, the state grant there, like for example on the homes roof, where it says 70 grand and then life to date 70 grand, does that mean we've collected 70 grand?
No.
Maybe like, and I guess maybe that 29,000 on life to date, should that be zero?
Yes, those should
Okay.
both be zero, because I'm certain we haven't gotten those yet, and I think I probably entered it in the wrong cell and then never backed it out. Sorry for the confusion on that.
Do you know when the DHS track project will be completed? Because I'm sure you're seeing those, you're remitting those payments.
Yeah, they've spent some of it. I don't know what their timeline is. I believe they expected to have it done by the end of the summer.
Yeah.
But I don't know exactly what the timing is.
Thank you.
I think it's like second week in August.
Okay.
So,
And the Norotan Fire Department conversion?
That had some design holdups. They have some money funded in RFC and RE for it, and a portion was appropriated as bond funds. There was a big delay during COVID with being able to get anybody out there and even give them quotes. Once they were able to get quotes, they far exceeded what their budget was, so they had to go back and take a look at what had been estimated, and they were able to make some changes that kind of got back to basics on what the conversion should be, and they're able to do it within budget, so they're starting to move on that now.
Okay. Just take a look at the completion date on that one as well.
It's probably way off, right?
22.
Oh, yeah. Well, looking backwards, I can tell you that that did not happen. I'll take a look at all the completion dates, because those probably have slipped through the cracks. That's about it on active bonded projects. Page 18 is our Great Island tracking. We had final legal bills come through. So the 441 that you see there, I do need to go through the final bills and actually split out which of the costs were through the actual acquisition date versus anything that's come after. So for now, the full amount was assumed to be for the acquisition. We're starting to spend some of that additional access and remediation, the $6 million. We've spent $32,000 of that. So we'll be, now that we have the Great Island Committee, we'll start getting a better sense of what that $6 million, how that $6 million is going to break down. And when we have that breakdown, we'll start tracking it on here.
So-
Jen, on the legal, I think it'd be great if you could split that out maybe between legal purchase and then
Yeah.
legal
Yeah.
post-purchase.
So
right?
what's shown as legal right now, everything that's above the additional access and remediation costs, and I'll put some headings on these and categorize them. But everything above that very last line is purchase related, except, like I said, I got to true up the legal number, but it's a very small amount of that 441 that's going to be for anything after the purchase.
So the items that remain as pending legal items will get subsequently charged to this additional access and remediation
Yeah.
line at some point in the future.
Right.
Okay.
And as those, firm up a bit, we'll be able to actually categorize them and track them.
Okay.
I feel like I'm missing a page. Did you guys have an ARPA report?
No.
Oh. Okay, I apologize, the ARPA spending report got cut off from our financial report, but
No, I think that's,
You
in-
have-
is that page 3? I mean, because
yeah.
I thought you had
we
it up
can
there with,
Substitute that for what's normally in the financial report, because that's as up to date as it was gonna be. And it does say what we've spent, what we have encumbered, because we wanted to start tracking the encumbrances so that we know how we're doing on that committed date. So we've spent 985, we have another 450 encumbered. And we have 4.8 available. Almost 4.9. But that is all I have on the financial report.
Thanks, Jen.
okay. Next item is our minutes from the June 20th meeting. Any comments?
No.
Okay. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, I'll take a motion to approve. Rob moves, Dave seconds. All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay, next is special assignments. Rob, do you have any?
Sounds like the audit just kicked off, so we'll wait for, probably a couple months, and then we'll get financials. I've tried to think October, September,
Probably closer to November.
November.
They definitely have staffing shortages on their side.
Like a lot of accounting firms do.
Yes. So our timeline is a little bit tighter because they have so few staff that they've had to schedule them very tightly, which may result in us getting our draft sooner.
Push it out. I mean, get it done, and that's good. Are you going to talk about the meeting we had?
Yeah, I'll get the, you want to go do HHR next?
Yeah, we, the building committee, we received the bids for each of the 3 schools, and our meeting to discuss them in detail as a committee is tomorrow, so I don't want to get too far ahead of the committee, but I can give you some broad strokes, if you will. I would say that the results from the bidding process were disappointing. Primarily around the area of bidder engagement, meaning bidder participation was low, to the point that on some of the bid packages, the project was broken up into 17 different bid packages for different elements of the work, and on some of the bid packages, we only received 1 bid. And if those were for minor portions of the project, it wouldn't be as concerning, but unfortunately, some of them were for large dollar components of the project, like the HVAC and electrical components. And those were big elements of the project. So the committee needs to have some conversation around that, because obviously assigning, awarding a contract with a single bidder is not appropriate. It flies in the face of how we do things in town. So we'll have to figure that out. So we are meeting tomorrow night to go over all the results of the bidding process and discuss possible next steps. We may not take any firm decisions tomorrow night because we've asked O&G to go out to all of the bidders who either specifically received a package or who drew down the package off of the website to review and figure out why it is they didn't bid specifically, what changes need to be made to the project itself, to the timing in the bidding process, right? How do we improve the bidder participation rate? And O&G said that we probably wouldn't have the full results from all of those conversations until our meeting the following week, July 26th. So by then we should have, information to be able to make some firm decisions about how we're going to proceed with it. it feels like the project is going to be delayed at this point.
And any general sense as to why?
There are a bunch of theories that have been sort of put forward, right? Like a traditional process would be to go out to bid in January for a late May, June start, right? And that sort of is the time frame when contractors are establishing their summer schedule, right? We went out to bid in mid-July for a mid-August start. There apparently is a lot of work around right now. So there may have been several subs that were just too friggin' busy to be able to devote the amount of time and attention. Because remember, this is complicated, right? There are 3 different schools. We're talking about phasing it over multiple years. Part of the time period of the project, the schools are going to be occupied. So it's not like a slam dunk, easy, put a bid on it kind of number. And also, because our bidding process got delayed, we asked for several weeks where there would be accelerated work schedules, so 6-day-a-week schedules. And some of the subs come from way upstate Connecticut, right? So there's some possibility that some of them didn't have any interest, in that type of thing. And I sort of already outlined the complicated nature of the project and doing some of the work while school is in session and having to phase it and those kinds of things. So the truth is, we don't know. That's why we're having them conduct the interviews. Was it the timing of when we went out with the bids, right? They didn't have, was it the fact that they were too busy with other things? Was it the fact that the project was too complicated? There are a whole, and there could be other things that the subs have in mind that we haven't even thought about yet. So that's why we want to do the interviews to try to figure it out. Because obviously, we could theoretically go out to bid again this fall, but if the contractors say, you know what, we're still going to be finishing up work from the summer, we still can't do it, then there's no point, right? We want to find out what the contractors say is the best way to get them to bid, and then we'll formulate a plan as to whether we're going to do that or not. Mind you, I don't want to be ahead of the committee. The committee hasn't voted to not accept the bids we have, right? We have to have that discussion tomorrow.
Those are 3 distinct bid packages. A sub could bid on one of the schools, but not all 3, or is that not accurate?
That's getting into the deeper weeds, but that is one of the problems as well. The O&G thought it would improve the odds that a sub would bid if you made it so that they could, if a sub was too busy and didn't have the bandwidth to do all 3, they could bid on one and they could potentially win the one, right? But there may have been other subs that said, you know what, if I'm not going to win them all, I don't want to waste my time going through the process of putting together a bid on each of the schools, right? So we don't know which side of that coin influenced the process the most, and it could have been multiple factors. And there were some other, there's a couple other very deep in the weeds technical things with the nature of the way the bids were structured, and we'll just leave those silent for now, if that's all right. So long-winded way to say that we're not getting off to a great start.
Well, David and I had a call with Jill and Chris and kind of run through it, and they gave me some of the details, and at least I think the way you guys are going about it, looking back at how the bids were sent out, why people responded one way or another on 1 versus 2, or there is ability for all or none on 2, but not all or none. I think kind of revisiting all of that, I think, is absolutely the right approach. And
obviously, we want to maximize bidder participation, right? To make sure that there was no inflation from someone who might have known they were the only bidder.
On Oxbridge, we did not have our meeting this month. It was canceled. Not a lot to report. I would say that we benefited when we went out to bid. I wasn't on the committee yet, but or maybe I was just on the committee, but it was during COVID, and there was not a lot of work. and I don't know what time of year it was, but I think the bids came in over $4 million less than what was budgeted for that. So a lot, I mean, not to take any praise away from the project's management, led by Kip, who's done a great job of managing the costs, but a lot of the cost savings was established at that moment in time. So it's just, benefit from a lack of work being contracted at the time.
So
That's all I have on Oxford.
Well, it sounds like, I know they reached out to like Kip and Duke to kind of talk about it, get all the best minds on it.
they have conferred with with Kip and Duke on that. They've conferred with Dr. Adley about what would work best for the school system, and Kevin as well with regards to the facilities and how it would impact them, depending on which course of action we choose. So we're trying to run as hard as we can with what we have.
One related note is Dr. Forshaw, the principal of Oxford, is moving on. He's decided to take a different position. So,
it's a big loss.
Which is a big loss.
Big loss.
He was a great partner during the project.
Yeah.
As you said, this was done while school was in session largely. And so we wish him all the best of luck. And I know the Board of Education is interviewing for his replacement.
Okay. Maybe just in terms of special assignments, Dan, myself, and Rob met with a few members of the Board of Ed and their staff to kind of talk about, and we're going to have the same conversation with town to get an update on and some data which we'll share with all of you, looking at sort of trends in healthcare, what's happened to individual premiums, what's happened to family premiums, what's happened to sort of employee plus one premiums. And they gave us a little bit of insight in terms of some of the prior work and investigation they've done in terms of partial self-insurance, where they insure sort of a first loss, and they've looked at it across, either taking a first loss on either an employee by employee basis, having an aggregate. I think there are a number of things that they looked at, and they're going to get back to us with some more information. I guess, it was, Rob and Dan certainly give some input here and jump in, but I think it was a great meeting. I think Rich and Marge, and it was kind of clear the Board of Ed had investigated a lot of things. I think there are some other things they're going to look at on the heels of our discussions, but I thought it was a very good kind of partner meeting.
Yeah, just to add to that, Rich Rudel, I think, has spent a lot of time in his current position, but in prior positions on the subject, and looks at it every year, and makes sure that our advisor, our consultant, looks at it every year and runs the numbers. And our claims history has suggested that this is a bad time to be considering self-insurance. There may be a good time down the road where it would be a good time to consider self-insurance. And what he said is you have these ups and downs, and some towns that go into self-insurance, when their claims history is down, ends up with it up and regret it. So you've got to be very careful before we move into that direction. But it's, again, I thought Rich was completely on top of the subject, as typical, and strongly recommended against moving in that direction at this time, again, specifically based on our recent claims experience, which is not expected to abate in the near term.
Can we not do that regionally, like work with other towns?
We pay regionally based on our pool. Our premiums are established based on a pool we have. If we were to move self-insurance, unless everybody agreed to go to the same, right, we would lose the benefits of the pool. And since we have a high claim experience, our premiums would probably go up even more, because we would probably divorce ourselves from the pool if we were to move in a self-insurance direction.
So
we get judged in our standalone claims. Lack of a better word.
Yeah. Right now, our claim experience is dragging the pool down. We're benefiting from the pool. They are not benefiting from our participation in the pool. So if we went to self-insurance, we would lose the benefit of participating in the pool.
Although I think our experience is better than the overall state, which is why we're not participating in the state program. But within our consortium, we've had some sort of tough years. And to the question about, I'd never use the term self-insurance. It's sort of a first loss. Yeah. If we wanted to take like X dollars per employee first loss, then we need to have everyone sort of in that consortium all agreeing to say, we want to take that, because
That's what I'm
the
thinking,
insurance
yeah.
companies are looking at sort of a horizontal slice and vertical slice across many, many districts.
Right, and I would think it's sort of random, right, or cyclical, weird, like, we had a couple of bad years, like, we're unlikely to have bad years next year, but then New Canaan might have them next year, and if everybody was, obviously, the more people we have involved.
I think the specific cases within our class have some tail. There's anticipated high claims for a period of time. So we're not through that peak. And it's not by person, not by named person, but it is by individual case. We know why our claims are high with respect to that case, and that's not expected to abate for a while. So at some point, but not in the next year or two, in their judgment, our pool will still be high. Our claim history will still be high.
So, and then along the lines of sort of employees, as you know, the Darien Administrators Association contract is, that process will begin. There are, I think with the new hires that are going to come on board, 33 members in that union group. That is expected to kick off in sort of late August, per the Teacher Negotiation Act, but also that includes administrators. There's sort of a procedural thing. If you recall, we had this meeting last year with the teachers, where the Board of Finance meets with the Board of Ed prior to them beginning. So I'd sent around some dates to you all, and so we're trying to lock that down. One of the things I think we will need to vote on tonight is, as you know, when they kick off their negotiations, typically a member of the Board of Finance will sit on as a representative, is required to sit on as a representative during those negotiations. And again, I think those are going to kick off in the back half of August. So tonight we would need to vote on that. I was going to suggest that I did this with the teachers last time and with the administrators the time before. I was going to ask your support in one, if you would, if the board would nominate me to be the representative. But I've also reached out to Dr. Adley and Duke to see if for some of the meetings I could actually bring a second in, just so that there's another set of eyes, kind of giving input from the board. So I'm waiting on, and I don't expect it to be a problem.
So you're gonna have to make a motion to add that as new business, so that you can vote on it.
Okay. So regarding special assignments, anything else, Taylor or Paul on pensions or anything?
Not anything, no.
Okay. So nothing more to add on the chairman's report. For new business, I will entertain a motion to add a new item to our agenda, which would be for the Board of Finance to vote on a representative to work with the Board of Ed on the DAA's 2023 negotiations. Can I get a motion to add that to the agenda? Rob moves. Dan seconds. All those in favor of adding it to the agenda? It's unanimous. So now in terms of this item, which I discussed a little bit during our special assignments, I'll entertain a motion to nominate anyone to serve as the Board of Finance representative.
I'll nominate Jim Palin.
Okay.
Second.
Is there a second?
Discussion.
Yeah.
Discussion, I was going to ask before you said, I think you've done an admirable job. It's not an easy thing to do that. But I think you're the only member of this board that has done that, and would make sense to add someone else, which you've already identified. So strongly encourage us to flesh that out.
Yes, and so I think they'll approve it, and then I would, I'm sort of open to who wants to join us. I know John is working on another one right now, so we can look at who's on other committees. I expect they'll say it's okay, but I do think it's good to kind of have two voices, and particularly because these negotiations have to move along relatively quickly along certain types of, so many meetings have to happen, Paul, right, within a certain number of weeks outlined or months out.
Before it goes to mediation or arbitration.
Yeah.
What's the relevant time period?
It's about 3 months.
No, I'm sorry, but what time of year?
So it basically will start in late August and should finish up in sort of, mid October, mid to late October. The cadence of all of these meetings are always based on when the given town votes on its budget, and then when the Board of Ed has to deliver its budget. And so it's kind of all backs up from those dates.
So we'll have another meeting in August to appoint a second representative if they agree to let that happen.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, and then we as a board will meet with them. Obviously, this is not a, it's not a sort of a warned meeting, but all 7 of us will have the opportunity to meet with them in early August before this is required by the state statutes. Okay, so all those in favor of nominating the chair as the Board of Finance representative? Yeah. Unanimous.
I think even Jen raised her hand.
Yes. Okay. That's it. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Rob, second. Taylor, all those in favor? Unanimous.